Some men break under the weight of loneliness, but a few, yeah, a very rare few, get forged by it, become something harder, stranger, maybe even stronger than they ever planned to be. I've lived enough years alone up on this mountain to know the difference, you know what I mean? That's my story, or at least it was, until a morning that should have been like any other. Except for the day everything changed, not just for me, but for her too. And I swear, if you're expecting some kind of pretty, neat ending, well, you might want to buckle up. Point 10 years. That's how long I'd kept away from people, from the town that spat me out and named me a beast after the night the Kellermans came for blood and left me with blood on my hands. I made peace with it, or tried to, waking every morning with black coffee bitter enough to bite. The forest for company, my father's old knife always close at hand. That blade was more than a tool. Sometimes I felt like it was the last thing tying me to who I'd been before everything went to hell. But you know, the ghosts outnumbered the living up there. It gets quiet. It gets safe. It gets empty. But the thing about exile is, sooner or later, you have to come down for supplies. And when I did, let me back up a sec. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for anything. Just coffee, bullets, salt, the usual. I meant to be in and out before the town remembered it hated me. But that morning, the church was crowded, noise pouring out onto the street, and I saw her, a woman with her chin up, eyes like green ice, standing at the altar in a dress she didn't want, being sold off to a man old enough to be her father because her own was dead and his debts wouldn't pay themselves. That I should have walked on. I really tried. But when the preacher asked if anyone objected and nobody spoke, something inside me snapped wide open, something I thought was dead. So, I stepped through that door, every head turning like they'd seen a ghost, and I told them all, I haven't seen a woman in 10 years. And then I did something crazy, something only a lonely man who's forgotten how to be gentle would do. I kissed her, right there in front of God and everybody, and told the preacher to marry us on the spot. You ever do something so wild you don't recognize yourself? That was me. And her, Clara Wynne, the girl in the borrowed wedding dress, the banker's prize, she let me. For a second, she even kissed me back. The room exploded, Fitzgerald's face purple with rage, people shouting, but it was too late. I dumped 10 years' worth of gold on the altar, enough to buy off her debts twice over. And with the preacher's trembling voice, she became my wife. You'd think that would be the end, but it was just the beginning. She looked at me on that church porch, her hand shaking in mine, and I realized she was more afraid of being owned than of being alone. I knew the feeling. So, we headed up the mountain together, her in city shoes, me pretending not to notice every time she stumbled on the trail, both of us too proud to admit we were terrified. Yeah, that happened. That cabin, my cabin, looked rough from the outside, but I'd built every inch with my own hands. And she, well, she didn't run. She didn't cry, either. Instead, she asked questions about the stove, the coffee, the fire, even my mother's old recipe book, and she tried. God, did she try? First batch of biscuits was so hard I could have used them for roofing, but she laughed, and I laughed. And for the first time in years, the cabin felt less like a tomb. There's something about hardship that's honest, you know? She burned her fingers, cursed at the stove, called herself useless, and I told her she was doing fine. Because she was. You can't learn life on a mountain in a day, and no book in the world prepares you for real fear. We settled into something that felt almost like peace, but Cedar Falls wasn't done with us. A week in, a wanted poster turned up, her face and mine, reward offered for her safe return from the dangerous fugitive Silas Boone. Fitzgerald couldn't buy her, so he'd rather see us both dead or dragged in chains. I taught her to shoot that day. She was scared, but her hands were steady, and after a while, she hit the target more than she missed. I told her she was my wife, not just on paper, but for real, and she said she wouldn't run, not ever. That was the moment we became partners, not just two scared people thrown together, but a team. It's a strange thing when the person you save turns out to be the person who saves you right back. You ever get the feeling you're living through a story somebody else started writing, and all you can do is see it through? Because the next twist was waiting. Marshals showed up, 3 men armed and sure of themselves, demanding to see the kidnapped woman. She stepped up, bold as brass, and told them she was Mrs. Boone now, and if they wanted her, they'd better come with a warrant and a whole lot more firepower. I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. But the real shock came when Clara found a letter hidden in the cabin, a blood-stained threat from Fitzgerald to her father, proof that he'd been murdered, not by fever, but by greed. There was more. A second letter from the old night clerk, Jacob Morrison, documenting every one of Fitzgerald's crimes, hidden in my floorboards for years, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. That's when Clara looked at me and said, "We have to go back." And I knew she was right. You can't hide forever, not when the truth is on your side, and the man you love is willing to risk everything to see justice done. We planned it out, her slipping through old mining tunnels into town with the evidence, me making enough noise on the other side of Cedar Falls to keep Fitzgerald's men busy. It was dangerous as hell, but we were done being afraid. She made it to Judge Harrison, got the letters into his hands, testified to everything. And just as Fitzgerald was hauled out of his mansion in handcuffs, the crowd saw me limping into the square, bruised but alive. And for the first time, the town that once called me a beast saw me as something else, a man standing with his wife, fighting for what was right. But nothing in life comes without one last reckoning. On the trail home, we were ambushed by Vincent Kellerman, youngest son of the family I'd fought a decade ago, and 4 men with him, all thirsty for blood. That was the moment when Clara did something I'll never forget. She stepped between me and Vincent, spoke to him not as an enemy, but as a person broken by loss, and broke the cycle of vengeance right there on the mountain. Sometimes it isn't the strongest who win, but the bravest, the ones who choose mercy over revenge. That we went home, together. And a year later, she stood on our porch, a child stirring in her belly, the sunrise painting our world in gold. We had built something, not just a home, but a future, and the old scars had started to heal. Now, if you're listening, I want to ask you, was any of this right or wrong, justice, or just more violence in a different name? I can't tell you. All I know is, sometimes you have to step out of exile, risk everything for love, and trust that, even if the world sees you as a beast, you might still find someone who sees the man underneath. So, tell me, if you'd been there that morning in Cedar Falls, what would you have done? And what do you think matters more, the law or what's right? Drop your thoughts below, because I have a feeling this story's not over, and sometimes the ending depends on who's telling it.